everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and I'm finally getting around to filming my January wrap-up. These are all the books that I haven't yet discussed. I have a vlog of 8 books that I read in January, so I won't really be talking about any of those. So I encourage you to check out that video if you want to hear about those books, but these are the leftovers, what I haven't talked to you about already. I also have a review for Little Women that I felt compelled to do a standalone video for, so that is also available. The first category we're going to talk about is romance. I read one romance in January, and I surprisingly like this. Slave to Sensation by Nalini Singh. I read this for a secret video project, and if you, this is like a sneak peek in that secret project that I'm working on. I only have one book left to read for that secret project, and then I can finally stop talking about it and actually film it and go for it. This is a paranormal romance urban fantasy about 2 species coming together. One is the Sci, one is the Changelings. The Changelings are animalistic in certain ways. They're shapeshifters. The Sci are, they have like telekinetic powers. They have like mind powers. They can like read each other's minds and have that kind of ability. And this is about a Sci woman and a Changeling man having a romance. And I actually really enjoyed this one. This had a little bit of the possessive, like, alpha male dynamic, but the Sci woman, I can't even remember her name off the top of my head. It's been a while since I read this. Has powers of her own and is able to, there's less of a power imbalance between the main couple, which is why I enjoyed this one better than other books in this same genre. And I gave this one 4 stars. For nonfiction this month, I read Disability Intimacy, Essays on Love, Care, and Desire, edited by Alice Wong. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a deeply broad, it made sense in my head, and then I said it, and then it didn't make sense. This is a broad series of essays discovering and kind of teasing out all of the ways that disabled people find intimacy, whether physically, romantically, platonically, emotionally, etc., etc. And I enjoyed this collection as far as you can enjoy a nonfiction. There were a couple of essays that really moved me, but overall I'd say this collection isn't quite as strong as Alice Wong's previous work, Disability Visibility, but I highly recommend both. I think this is a really valuable collection, and again, I give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. For horror, we have Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This is a 3-star for me, and this is a strange one because it's almost a romance, but obviously the romance goes wrong. So we're following Rosemary and Ash, and Rosemary meets Ash at a farmer's market, and they start up a sapphic romance. But the thing is, this is told from Rosemary's point of perspective, and Rosemary is incredibly unlikable. So part of me was rooting for Ash. I'm trying not to spoil this book, but things do turn sour in the relationship, and things get dark. And so it was really hard reading from Rosemary's point of view. She gives off very much so, I'm not like other girls, but she's also like really bad at listening to Ash and Ash's boundaries, which is frustrating. It makes us not want to root for Ro because she hates the name Rosemary. And honestly, I was really vibing with this whole book, except for the, wasn't loving Rosemary, but I was really into the sense of dread and doom that was coming. However, the ending, it really works for some people and it really doesn't work for some. And for me, I thought it was a satisfying ending for this story. However, it was really gruesome for me. This was past my comfort level in terms of grotesqueness. It really weirded me out and really grossed me out, and I still kind of get sick to my stomach when I think about the ending of this book. So that's just a personal preference thing. Your tolerance for horror may be much more intense than mine, but I'm kind of a baby still. Especially when it comes to like body horror type stuff. And that's all I'll say on Bloom. Honestly, if that ending had been maybe slightly less gruesome, this would have been like a 4 or a 4.5. For fantasy, the first one we have is The Witch Would Not by Olivia Atwater. This is a new series by Olivia Atwater in the same world as Half a Soul and those 3 books, but this is following like the next generation of folks. So there are some mentions from the previous series. I don't think it's necessary to read her Regency fairy tales before picking this up, but this is about a main character who gets a job as a governess at a crumbling manor, and she has to protect a small boy from a curse, essentially. And this ends up being a romance, kind of a cozy romance, similar to Olivia Atwater's other works. I give this 4 stars. I really like this. My favorite part was Winnie, our main character. She is actually really capable and really smart and kind of knows what she's doing, which is kind of refreshing to have a main character who is so smart and capable. It's just really enjoyable to read for me personally. Obviously, she's going through trials and tribulations, and she's figuring stuff out about the house, the curse, and all of that, but she is a very capable main character, and I really appreciated that. None of Olivia Atwater's books, other than Small Miracles, have been 5 stars for me, but I really enjoy her work, and she's definitely like a 4-star author across the board for me personally. The other fantasy I have to talk about is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang. This is a standalone dark academia, dual point of view fantasy, and we are following 2 characters. One is a colonizer and the other is the colonized, and this is kind of a story about the colonizer realizing that they are a colonizer and trying to help the colonized, essentially. And I feel the same way about Blood Over Bright Haven as I do about Babel by R.F. Kuang. So if you love Babel, you will love Blood Over Bright Haven. They have very similar themes. They talk about colonialism and that type of theme, but in my opinion, both Babel and Blood Over Bright Haven are not subtle, are not subtle with their themes or their executions. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, because, you know, media literacy in this country is not great. So I understand to an extent having to kind of beat the reader over the head with the messaging and the themes. But for me personally, it was a little too on the nose and a little tiring to be talked to by the author. Like, there's a difference between the characters like naturally, organically discussing things and themes just coming through the plot and the characters, and the author like, this is how you should feel. At least that's my impression. I still really enjoyed the plot. We have kind of a magical academic setting, kind of opposites attract, a pseudo romance sort of happening on the side. The magic system is fascinating, and there was a lot to like in here. It was a little too unsubtle for me. I still gave this 4 stars. I gave Babel 4 stars. I'm pointing to it, by the way, it's up there. So I enjoyed both stories. They're just not the perfect books for me, but I highly recommend both of them, especially if you love one, you might like the other. The last book we have to talk about is one of my favorites that I read in the sci-fi category, and that is Those Beyond the Wall by Micaiah Johnson. This is a direct sequel to The Space Between Worlds, and I had no idea this book was coming out or came out, that it was a sequel. I didn't know anything until I just saw it one day on the internet. I was like, oh my gosh, a sequel! We are following, I think it's 15 or 20 years after the events of book 1. This is a direct sequel following a different main character. So I wish I had read The Space Between Worlds right before going into this one, just because it took me about 20% to get my bearings and to remember the world and the politics and kind of who these people were, more so than I would be trying to like orient myself in a fantasy or a sci-fi world, because I could tell it was supposed to be familiar, but it wasn't. So I highly recommend reading these two books kind of close together. They are separate stories and there's a time jump between them, but I think the world building would be a lot smoother than my experience. Our main character is named Scales. That is a nickname, or her gang name. She has another name that she is referred to by it, but I don't want to spoil it because her identity is kind of a secret in this world, so I don't want to spoil anything for this book. The thing that I enjoy about Micaiah Johnson's stories so much, the thing that I enjoyed about Space Between Worlds was her interesting character dynamics and the character arcs that we go on with these characters, as well as the plot being really interesting. And that's the same for Those Beyond the Wall. We're just diving even more deeply into similar themes. Those that are left behind, kind of class differences, you know, people who get to escape the environmental catastrophes that the rest of the poor and brown populations have to deal with. So there's a lot of great meaty stuff in here and a really interesting character in Scales, and interesting familial and friendship dynamics all around. This is a very queer normative society too, I believe. Everyone's like either bisexual or pansexual. Scales is polyamorous, and there's a lot of polyamory rep in here, which is also like normalized in this society, so that's awesome. This is sort of an enemies to lovers subplot as well, which is one of my favorites, and the plot really does pick up after that 25-30% mark and becomes really fascinating. I loved the sci-fi. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was one of my best reads of the month, and I can't wait to have my own copy and I can put it next to The Space Between Worlds on my shelves. Those were the books that I haven't yet discussed that I read in January, and I will see you in another video of mine very soon.